Welcome to the Unshakable Foundations meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and it is today with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Andy, who will be sharing for up to about 40 minutes, after which we will open up to the questions and answers portion of the meeting. Andy, it's over to you, please.
Hey, everybody. My name is Andy. Blessed to be a cocaine addict, blessed to be an alcoholic, and a few other things. But for the purposes of this meeting, that's enough. Thank you so much to Isaac, Young, Ella, Tim, Tanya, and the whole service team here. It's not only an honor, but a privilege and ultimately a responsibility to give back to CA. CA and AA saved my life. I can never give back to those two fellowships, but I could try one day at a time. And it's really beyond words to sit in this space with all of you today. And, you know, I did choose one line in our book to try to see if God wants me to key off that and tell my story in a general way, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like today, in whatever order God would have it. But I've been taught in here to do everything I can to get me out of the way, you know, less me, more thee. And, you know, I was taught in here, you know, as some philosophers and poets say, it's not just about asking God for a favor. You know, if I only talk to God when I need a favor and I only pray when I ain't gotta, who the heck am I? Who the heck am I to expect a savior if I only talk to God when I need a favor? But God, I need a favor. And to move from Jelly Roll to Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton, you know, a great spiritual teacher for so many of us. He understood us. You know, he said we care for ourselves in the service of others. And he was talking not just about us, but I'm sure many others. He also said God's first language is silence. But he gave us this prayer, a prayer of unknowing. God, my Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me, and I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I know myself. But the fact that I think I am following your will and have the desire to will help me do so. Please, Heavenly Father, continue to give me the desire to search for what you would have me be. And I hope I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though it may seem to be lost in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you're ever with me, and you'll never leave me to face my perils alone. Amen. You know, I really want to welcome anybody that's new, not so new, trying to be renewed, struggling, think you have nothing left. Maybe you're having a great day. Maybe you've had a great, you know, few days. You know, welcome home. It was explained to me that if I didn't do cocaine today, I've tied the record. No one's done it any better. So 24 hours period of time in a row, you know, signifies that folks have been around a while, but it's really about this moment. It's really about right now. And for folks that are struggling, you know, welcome. We got you. You know, you're with us now. And our book talks about it. I'm going to talk about our big book. And you might say I'm an Orthodox fundamental conservative member of CA and AA. And that means for me that I talk about the big book a lot. I cry a lot, and I don't apologize for it. See, one way to show our gratitude that you taught me was with the buckets of tears that get shed in these rooms. And you've all taught me so much, including to just let the tears fly. So if we go to page 124, there's something, you know, that, you know, is riveting to me today. And I bet so many of us that, you know, our dark past is our greatest asset. With it, we can avert death and misery for countless others. What a promise. You know, there are so many promises around in this book, so many warnings, so many directions, and so many prayers, but that promise means that, you know, there's value here, no matter where I am, where any of us are in our journey. Now, if you're like me, your journey's been generous. And I think Hopefully we're all here for the full catastrophe, right? So the gift of a sober life is just that, the gift of a sober life. And when I experience life as a gift, I experience gratitude. And, there's a lot to be grateful for. One thing that I'll call out right now is the pain that brought me to you so you could bring me to God. And you said, here are the handrails are the steps. And if you stick around with us, you're going to develop your own relationship with the spirit of the universe, your own relationship. And for me today, that's the most important relationship in my life. Everything hinges on that. Without that, things aren't going to work. I'm gone, and one thing, to talk about is in Bill's story, there's a lot to talk about. This book is a book of mirrors, right? And we reflect each other and find ourselves on these pages. And it is the greatest love story of the 20th century. Welcome to it. And now the 21st century. Oscar Wilde said something like, to love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. And he said some other things too, but this is about love. And I want to tell you that I love you all. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. I love you all because I sense you in me, and hopefully you sense me and you. There's a sense of oneness. There's a sense of knowing each other instantly, despite the details, And our disease does a lot of energy to try to separate us with the details of our stories. But it's the details of our stories can be set aside, and ultimately it's the truth and the miracle that brings us together. So in Bill's story on page 2, he's just getting into his, descent into the madness. But not yet. He's on his road. So it's on page 2, and there's a line in there that says, out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. So we had a mixture of drink and speculation. And that was me, That was me. See, the great effect that alcohol gave me at age 15 when I came out of a childhood in which I just happened to come into this world separate, apart, and different. It's nobody's fault. Yeah, so look, it was a broken childhood. My mother had 4 husbands. I used to say in in-person meetings in my home group, same home group I've been in since virtually the beginning, that, my mother's had 4 husbands. She's still available. See me after the meeting. And I would get a couple of laughs there, but ultimately over the years, it just didn't seem that funny. But, husband number 2 was, he was damaged by World War II. He came back. He wasn't whole. I didn't know that. I'm age 8 and age 9. He leaves us. So there's the abandonment that sets in. And husband number 3 he's a serial domestic violence perpetrator that, put us in the hospital, terrorized us. There was dread 24/7. And on top of that, see, my mother married him and knew it because he had done this to a previous family, but she married him anyway. Now, when I came in, I thought that's it. That's why I'm an alcoholic and a cocaine addict, and it didn't work out that way. Those things, those circumstances made me thirsty. So by age 15, this squirrely kid that didn't fit in anywhere, I live life like an ingrown hair, There's not a lot of ways to describe the spiritual malady, the unmanageability on the other side of the dash, the inner malady. That's what I'm talking about, not the stuff on the outside. It can get reflected on the outside, but I want to be clear that the second part of step 1 talks about the hole in my belly with the wind blowing through it, the sense of just not being able to live with myself, feeling almost allergic to yourself, but you can't do anything other than maybe think, well, what's wrong with me? And if you're like me, you didn't utter that to anybody. I didn't say that to anybody. But at age 15 in summer camp, when alcohol was introduced to me, ice cold beer, I was electrified. Finally, I could relax. I was treated, alcohol treated my alcoholism in the beginning. And I was to seek that feeling. It wasn't just a sense of ease and comfort. It was a sense of peace of mind, of belonging, right? Of moving from the outside circle to the inside of the circle. And we talk about that great effect. right? Bill talks about it, as the alloy of drink and speculation. Once I had alcohol in me, and then not too long after, cocaine. There was a time when two shots of Jägermeister and one line of cocaine in each nostril, man, I could take on the world, right? And I could speculate, I could speculate about where I was going to go in my life, the people I would meet, the career I was going to have, because everything got better, Even back at age 15, when I just had drink, I was suddenly transformed, when it came to just being a better basketball player, talking to girls and guys, moving from the outside of the circle to the inside of the circle. And then Bill talks about, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn in its flight like a boomerang. So what happened for me was that great effect. If we go to, the doctor's opinion, right? It says men and women essentially drink because they like the effect produced. The sensation is so elusive, we're now in the doctor's opinion, that while they admit it to be injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. I didn't like that effect. I love that effect. I was addicted to feeling that way, a sense of wholeness, right? And what I had, which you people showed me years later, after a long run trying to get back there, was, I simply had a spiritual thirst for wholeness or union with God. This was explained in letters between Bill Wilson and Carl Jung, who understood us. The eminent psychiatrist understood the second part of step one, the unmanageability, right? So this great effect, which for me, started to, be difficult to get back to. Right? The chase was on. The race was on to find that. And what did it do? That effect was riveting. It pushed me into the moment. So suddenly, I went from maybe the way Bruce Springsteen described me untreated, which was, it's a sad man who's living in his own skin and can't stand the company, to maybe what Pharrell Williams said when life is like a room without a roof. That was what it did. That was what it did. And we talk about that great effect that went from the greatest love to now not just an obsession, but the only thing that mattered, right? And what happened in that journey, and I'll go into it a little bit, but in summary, what happened was that towards the end, 20 years ago, actually, around now, when I got caught and thrown into a rehab, that effect abandoned me, right? But it had me still in its grips, right? Because we say it's elusive. That doesn't mean I'm not going to continue to try to get back there, right? Because it's the only thing that ever worked. It's almost like some people talk about this, the Stockholm syndrome, right? Where captors, the hostages actually almost fall in love with the captors. That was me. So I commenced to forge this weapon, right? Which means this, that I needed to find out that the depths of what alcohol gave me in the beginning and cocaine was going to be the depths of what it took away in the end. I believe that's a spiritual law. And Bill gives us this boomerang analogy because some of you may know that he was an inventor of a boomerang and had a patent on it, in the United States for some time. So Bill was a man of many talents, but also a designer of boomerangs, apparently. So time went on, and I, chased this for over 30 years. I tried real hard, and I got to a place where there was nothing I could do. And now we're talking 20 years ago, the summer 2005. There was nothing that I could do that I could take from the outside to put inside that would make me feel complete. I could still get drunk here or there, or certainly could get high. And I was, basically 24/7 trying to get back there, but I was without an answer. But no one knew. See, I didn't get to you as a hot mess. I got to you as an icicle. I was frozen, and if you looked at my life from the outside, you'd say it was pretty good. wife at home, children at home, cars in the driveway. I still had a job. And this was this great secret because, see, I'd become this champion liar. And if you're like me, the idea that you could be, constitutionally capable of being honest when How It Works gets read, that was me when I got here. That terrified the heck out of me because this ability to lie, cheat, and steal, and it wasn't just about money, but it was about manipulating people and getting what I wanted. In a way, the best way I could talk about my character defects are that it's my best attempt at getting what I want. And I tried real hard, tried real hard. So I get to you, completely broken and lost. And there were some good times along the way. I'd be remiss not to say that there weren't great times. Child of the 70s, basically put everything in my body except spike a vein. And the cocaine was just completely abundant, out of control, fueled things in the 80s for me into the 90s. A lot of clubs in New York City. Some of them are fairly legendary. I was at Studio 54, but I used to tell you that, Mick Jagger was at Studio 54, which was true. And I would tell you that I saw Mick Jagger, but I never saw him. I still couldn't even tell you the truth. I would tell you I saw James Brown at the Copacabana, never saw that, but I was at the Copacabana. All those early videos of Madonna in the 80s were shot at a club called Danceteria. I was at Danceteria all the time. I tell you, I saw Madonna, never saw her. So there were some good times, right? But eventually that effect that I was still chasing, was getting smaller and smaller. And I get to you 20 years ago in the summer of 2005 because I got caught. I got caught, as it turned out, because I ran out of lies. Little did I know that God had paralyzed the liar in me in these moments that I was sitting there with Susan. I was in my office. She called me and said, all this money's missing. And there's this pause. And she said, do you have cancer? She knew something was wrong. And I said, no, I think I'm an alcoholic. I wasn't about to utter the cocaine part because, see, there was so much money that was gone. And I wasn't going to say, I didn't say that at the time. She found out later, not long after. But the reality was, there was a moment there. And it's true, we see God in the rearview mirror, right? We see the handiwork of the master sometimes, maybe in the moment, but often it's in the rearview mirror. It's that analogy of, the lamplighter, right? Many folks from the UK here, probably about lamplighters, picture London in the 1800s and you'd have, guys going around and lighting the gas lamps. And it's been said you never knew where they were, but you can always tell where they've been. And that's God, So what happened was I didn't lie in that moment. And I've come to recognize that as an absolute spiritual gift, a glimmer, right? And from that moment on, everything changed, went into a rehab. Right now, 20 years ago, I'd be sitting in there, crying my eyes out, ice cold tears, couldn't pick my head up from the floor, couldn't say anything, mumbling, couldn't give you a clean urine either, and I got thrown out of there. And from that moment, again, everything changed. See, what had happened was that folks from CA and AA brought meetings into that facility. You save lives. You were carrying this message. So my recovery did not start with step 0 on page 30, or step 1, which is about 60 pages or so. It started in the 12th step, in your hearts. You brought that meeting in. And through that meeting, I stumbled into my home group. It's still the same home group, Bagels, Love and Fellowship, Saturday morning, 10:30 a.m. Come join us. Come join us. It's a wonderful group that's been around for a lot of years and now on Zoom for like 5 years. But I didn't want anything other than to get into a corner of a room, grab a cup of coffee and be left alone. But no one left me alone. There was laughter. There was just loud noise. There were bagels flying. There was just people laughing, crying, talking over each other, hugging each other. And folks came over to me and said, welcome. You're new, right? And I said, how can you tell? And they'd all be laughing. And I just wanted to still get away from them. And they said, come here, let's sit down. And they said a lot of things to me. They said, which I hold today is something I hope I never forget, that we're going to love you until you can love yourself. The idea of loving myself, I don't know about you, but as I descended into the abyss of my own wretchedness, because see, I was bleeding from the inside for a long time. There was a lot of years of recriminations. How can I be building this double life? I'll just fast forward a little. I'm blessed to say that, thank God for AA and CA and God, that, Susan and I, my wife, we're married 40 years. We have 2 adult children. I have 1 grandchild and 1 on the way. All the blessings that have come, none of it guaranteed, but that's just the way it's worked out. But if you looked at me 20 years ago, I was frozen and broken, completely. There was nothing left. And it's back to Oscar Wilde again. Because, see, Oscar Wilde gave us this great short story that's been made into a movie. It's been made into a play, It's called A Picture of Dorian Gray. And it's again back to the UK, right? You got Oscar Wilde, talking about Dorian Gray walking around the streets of London. He's completely enamored by everybody. Everybody thinks he's like, the man, right? He's a good-looking guy. He's got money. He's got everything. And a portrait gets made. It gets put into a closet. And time goes on. He ages. Well, no one sees that he's aging because, see, on the outside, he looks the same. And everybody else around him ages, They're all getting wrinkly and, they look at him and they're suspicious, something's going on. So where he aged was in that closet, that portrait. That portrait was the picture of him from the inside out. It was disgusting. It was revolting. It was hideous. It was me. It was me. But I'll fast forward a little bit. That's really the 4th step. Who I'm not, who we all are not. Whatever that picture looks like from the inside can get completely destroyed, with the 5th step. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. I was feeling completely just, it was more than lost. It was incomprehensible, the words that are best to be used about how I felt on the inside and going nowhere. So that home group, when they said, we're going to love you until you can love yourself, I clung to that. And today that meeting, is all about the morning after. Can't you see the morning after? It's waiting right outside the storm. Why don't we cross the bridge together and find a place that's safe and warm? Maybe Bob Dylan said it best. I was burned out from exhaustion, buried in the hail, poisoned in the bushes and blown out on the trail. Hunted like a crocodile, ravaged in the corn. Come in, she said, we'll give you shelter from the storm. And that group took me in. I needed to go through some things, such as the steps. I went through a period of time on page 30 that some of you may have been through or maybe in now, in which you go round and round and round, thinking that you have more than 2 options. The concession has to be made, concede to me and myself that I'm one of you. And I needed to burn through that period of time without drinking and using, in which I was completely not only baffled, but on the ground, on my knees, crying out. And suddenly in a parking lot in New Jersey, I'm told this, the party's over and step 0 ends. It's as if, the most profound thing was said to me by a guy named Jimmy Shoes. He says, the party's over And I hung up the phone, and suddenly step zero had ended. I didn't know that they call it step zero because you go round and round and round, thinking that you have more than two options, such as maybe if I put the cocaine down, I can drink. Maybe if I put the drink down, I can do cocaine. Maybe I leave Susan again. All these things that the disease likes to use because it's still there. It's still gasping for air. You know, the absolute concession, the surrender with a fight that had to happen. And once that happened, I received the gifts of step one, the miracle of finding out that I'm one of you. Finally, I belong somewhere. Finally, I'm not alone. The miracle of step one, which meant and means to me today that to drink and use cocaine is to die. I'm not negotiating, right? The first step experience needs to be vital, conscious, and needs to be completely, of my deepest recesses of my soul to know and experience today. And the beauty of it is I don't get to just stay stagnant there. By working the rest of the steps, the first step experience gets brighter and brighter. Some people describe our disease as a two-part disease. I like to call it a four-part disease, but don't quote me on it. Well, quote me if you want. It may not be exactly in the big book, but some of it is. I have a physical allergy to cocaine, which means when I put cocaine in my body will not stop until I pass out, run out, or get locked up. The second part of it is the powerlessness that's contained with the fatal obsession, an obsession of the mind that's greater than any force I've ever experienced. When cocaine called, boy, I ran, there was nothing that would stop me. Didn't matter. I had a wife and kids at home. I mean, it's kind of interesting when I'm on the dance floor of a club at age 42 that I'd been there at age 20, drunk and high, looking at the dance floor and asking, is this all there is? And I went back to the bar and went out to the dealer. That was it. What else was I going to do? So time is very clear about that. So that obsession is greater. I've seen from as a mother's love for her children. It was greater than my love for my kids and my wife. I'll tell you that. But the beauty of it is that in those letters between Carl Jung and Bill Wilson, Carl Jung talked about alcohol. He talked about addictive substances in general. And he said that in essence, if you go after the king, you best not miss. And he used the Latin expression, spiritus contra spiritum, that the spirits of alcohol, spirits of cocaine, however you want to talk about a mind-altering substance, the Spirit of God is greater than that. That's why the most important relationship in my life has to be God. Because, see, to stay alive, I need God between me and the thought of the first line of cocaine. I need me before the thought of the first drink. That's recovery. It's not about negotiating. The power of choice has been lost. It's very clearly talked about and more about alcoholism. Sanity means that in a recovered state, I can get by day and be in a position of neutrality, safe and protected, because God is between me and the thought of those substances. What a blessing. What a blessing. What an absolute, answer, to this disease. The disease, though, has roots inside me. The other side of the dash is somewhat of a pause in the first step. The other side of the dash, for me, the unmanageability. I came into this world separate, apart, and different. I came into this world, like a badly wrapped gift. Came into this world like a mule in a Texas hailstorm. I can't run, I can't hide, and I can't make it stop. The winds of just discontent and ill at ease. I couldn't put words about this. Some of the best words to describe the spiritual malady, there's a phrase in our 12 by 12, the pangs of anxious apartness. Of course, page 52 talks about it very clearly, as the doctor's opinion does. In page 52, we talk about the bedevilments, to be bedeviled, to be tortured by loneliness, by 400 forms of fear, can't get along with people, misery to prey, a prey to misery and depression, a prey to misery, which means there's a predator out there, right? And little did I know that the key to unlock this all was always on the inside, right? It was never really on the outside. These substances, though, cocaine kept me from blowing my brains out for a lot of years, I can't just throw that away and say it didn't happen. Somehow it preserved me enough so I could come to you and you could show me the way. The fourth part of the disease is I put a lot of harm out into the world. And that means amends need to be made. I need to be suddenly transformed as the result of these steps, because the whole idea is to get to the fourth dimension, right? The first 9 steps are a slingshot to get me to the fourth dimension. As my sponsor, Jerry, used to say, Jerry was the kind of sponsor that he liked to tell me, well, he loved to tell me because he loved me and he did not want to, he'd rather step on my toes than step on my grave, because when I came to him, I had a wall of denial, delusion, and refusal. And he looked at that and he said, you know what? Thermometers have degrees. You know where they put them, Andy, right? He was very to the point. He even said something like AA and CA without the steps is like pouring maple syrup on a pile of crap and expecting it to taste like French toast. He said to me, you can stay sick in CA and have plenty of company, or you can get well. And the difference is the steps, the formula for sobriety, the formula for God, and the formula for the good life. Thank God for good sponsorship and the men and women I've been blessed to sponsor, because in the end, this is all about generating sponsors so we can carry this message to still others. So the amends, process has led to peace. Peace, not just for me, but peace for others. Imagine that, right? And we're back to relationships. So I want to spend the last few minutes talking about relationships, because ultimately, and I don't know about you, if you read some of the lines in the book, that talk about the warped lives of blameless children, or in our 12 by 12 that say that we're virtually incapable of forming a true partnership with another human being. And I'm sitting here with Susan and Alex and Lauren. And wait a minute, I deny that that's true for a bit, but then eventually I see that that's absolutely true. And over the years, it's taken time. My sobriety date's October 21st, 2005. So I went from the summer 2005 till October, in which finally I was brought to my knees, and God came between me and the thought of cocaine and me and the thought of a drink. I realized that that's a moment when the whisper of desperation grew to a scream and was greater than using those substances. Yeah. But along the way, there's been a lot of damage there. There's been a lot of absenteeism, because I might have been there physically, but was I really there, emotionally? Did I generate enough worry, concern, terror in the home? Sure. So I've had the opportunity for that to heal, and there's still work to be done. Yeah. Susan and I are married over 40 years now. We'll be 41 in December. We're probably going to make it, I think. But the beauty that happens now in our relationship is you told me how to feel my own heart. You taught me that, Popeye was right. I am what I am. That's all that I am. You taught me that I could sit with me in the moment, and experience the pain and let people know about it, because I hid it for so long. And it's only been really in the last couple of years that Susan's gotten a glimpse of what the pain's been like that I've been in. I'm not unique. This is not an outside job here. This is an inside issue to tell you that, I needed to experience, the benefits of psychiatric care, of therapy, all those things. But nowhere near was I in a place of despair that this program, you folks and God, were not working there. That's the beauty of it. When I said life is like a room without a roof, it means that these relationships, there's going to be not just joy, but there's going to be tragedy. There's going to be laughter, but there's going to be peace. There's going to be serenity. There'll be some thrilling moments. But if you ask me today, how surprised I am, I would tell you that I continue to be surprised because, see, the power of God is in the surprise. The power of God is in the willingness to search. So I want to share an experience real fast that maybe, I'm not unique. I was taught in here, if you think you're unique, you're terminal. We put these words, terminal uniqueness, together. We put, egomaniac with low self-esteem. We've got all these things that describe this alcoholic personality, which I've come to embrace now, right? You all taught me how to feel my own heart, which means that I get to be honest and open and gentle and loving today. And I don't know if you have any people in your life that you might describe as, how should I put it? Well, I'll put it this way. There's 2 laws that were tested recently, like 2 days ago. One was that if I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. The other is that I'm responsible to protect my sobriety above all else. Can't depend on people that love me, can't depend on people, at all. Ultimately, I'm responsible, to preserve and protect this so I can stay sober and help somebody else. And I don't have time to get into the story, but it was tested yet again. But God came right in and stayed there. And it was a situation where I was under a barrage, what I thought was an attack. And I kept my mouth shut. I kept it closed, and it passed. Now, in the wake of it was, I was a little just wound up from it, a little shut down from it, but that passed. And I thank God for it, right? Because this program that we have is a design for living that works in the rough going, it works in the rough going. So I'm going to end with this. I want to end with the beauty of what this program, this fellowship and all of you, because I'm sober here, by the gift of God's grace and a relationship with that grace. I'm sober here because of a first step experience, which means today that to use and drink is to die. I'm sober because you've taught me to work the steps, and continuous, go in circles, right? Inward, strict spiritual disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. I'm sober because of good sponsorship, my family that's been with me right from the beginning, which includes all of you. And I get to be what my sponsor, Jerry, said to be. My job as a sponsor is to help you meet the conditions to enter the world of the Spirit. And when you enter the world of the Spirit, God can heal this broken world through you. That's the 4th dimension. But I get constantly reminded that the 3rd step dimension is right over there. I don't curse much, but in New Jersey, we call the 3rd dimension sitting here is the shit fairy. The shit fairy likes to hang around and just pop up here and there. So I've experienced great joy and great tragedy, and it's happened all around the same time. I've told this story before, but it's just coming out now. Our daughter Lauren got married a year or so ago, and this beautiful place up in upstate New York on a lake. The weather was great, and I got to go to the wedding. I got to dance with her. I got to see, they have this tradition where you can see, a bride's dress before she gets married, if you're the father of the bride. And picture Lauren, behind me. I'm looking at the lake, and she taps me on the shoulder, and we're both hysterical crying. There's no words. We're just losing it, and I mean snot-nosed tears, the full blood. And then I get to say this at the reception. Love is patient, love is kind, love rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always hopes, and always perseveres. Lauren and Nick are a couple for the ages who met during the pandemic, fell in love, and then decided to share their lives together forever, singing, "Then I look at you, and the world is all right by me. Just one look at you, and I know it's going to be a lovely day." We danced to that. That's Bill Withers. But around the same time, literally overlapping, best friend for me and for so many in our family. Her name was Barbara. She passed away after a valiant battle with cancer. You probably all have a Barbara in your life, somebody that you would go to for anything and they'd have an answer. Somebody that was selfless, that loved you all, no matter what you did, and would be there in a moment's notice. That was Barbara. Around the same time, Barbara was buried, and at the dedication for her, for her headstone, I was asked to say some things, and I said this: the wind in Barbara's life is now the wind in our lives. The wind is simply crossed over. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and how we spend our dash. That's a poem by Linda Ellis, and it talks about the dash between when we're born and when we cross over. You all taught me how to live my dash, right? You took me out of the wilderness and brought me along, and certainly loved me before I could love myself. And the gratitude now is to be here with you and to say, to everybody, welcome. Just stay. My number will be in the chat. Anybody stuck on page 30 in step 0, let's talk. We can talk anyway. I want to thank the group for having me. Went over a little bit here, and I'll end with this. Got to end with the Wizard of Oz. Remember Dorothy standing there with Toto, right? The dog. Dorothy is getting the instructions from Glenda, the Good Witch of the East. Glenda says, "What have you learned?" And Dorothy said, "There's no place like home." Dorothy was being pointed to the inside, the great reality, God, that's been within all of us right from the beginning. In Dorothy's case, she had to click her heels. In our case, we just have to be here right now and be willing. God expresses him or herself in willingness, and when I'm willing, I'm changed. Stay with willingness. That's what was told to me. So I love you all. That's enough. Thank you.
Tobias, you're in first. Come on in.
Hey guys, my name's Tobias. I'm a recovered addict. Andy, my friend, it's good to see you, my friend. I always loved hearing your shares and the poetry in it. And my question is, what was the biggest challenge you had to face in sobriety, and how did you overcome them?
Thanks, Tobias. Great to see you too, my brother. I think the hardest was, God, a few years ago, certainly as the pandemic hit, went from a very safe, routine and everything. And I was thrown into the first bout of depression that I've experienced my whole life. And I was, you all caught me and held me. I was taught if I'm going to fall apart, I'm going to fall about in here. And it doesn't mean I'm going to pick up a drink or a drug, but I'm going to fall about in here. And I needed to go through that therapy, and get through it. And today, it's, like a room without a roof, right? So I'd say that being honest and open about that was also a challenge. Sometimes we talk about those are outside issues here, and it's not been my experience. I was told when I got to you that CA and AA we're not a hotbed of mental health, and I'm not unique. So to be able to share about that was important because I certainly wasn't the only one. But that was a tough one. Yeah, that was the toughest.
Thank you for your question, Tobias. And Michael, can you come in, please?
Michael, recovered addict. Thank you, Tanya, for sharing, and thank you very much, Andy, for your share. It was absolutely wonderful. I was hooked on almost every single word. You talked quite a bit, but when you're like, we've got to keep it in the moment. Sometimes the mind can wander. And do you ever find yourself that your mind's wandering and you'll pray for God to remove it, and it'll remove it for a little bit, and then before you know it, your mind's away down that rabbit hole again? And if you do you have how do you bring it back? Do you know what I mean? But thank you again, man. It was truly blessed to hear you. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. the best thing that works for me, and it really never fails, is to ask myself what I'm grateful for. Because that tends to now take me out of the past or in the future being fear, the past being regret or resentment, and pulls me back into the moment to experience that. That just asking what I'm grateful for and then going into prayer. Some centering prayers. I use a prayer by Emmett Fox, that says something like, God is here, God is now, God is with me. Amen. Very simple, It's almost a mantra. And that seems to bring me back. It doesn't work every time, but it sometimes I just need to sit in the pain too and experience it. And when that happens, if things are really going well, meaning that I can sit in the pain, I just smile and say, okay, because God doesn't waste pain. So every opportunity with pain is a growth experience. As hard as that is to say, but now that's been my experience. God doesn't waste pain. So.
Thank you for your question, Michael. Martin, come on in.
Well, thanks everyone for your service and everyone else in the background. And my name's Martin. I'm a very grateful recovered addict and alcoholic.
Hey.
And I didn't have to take a drug today, thanks to God, as I understand it. I apologise. I'm coming down with something there. And I really enjoyed your chair, Andy. And I just wanted to ask, I completed my steps and it's 5 months now, but, I still can get restless and, some fears can come in. I can go back into self. So what was the turning point in your early recovery?
The turning point, yes. Hey, Martin, thank you for that. The turning point was when I was on a jumping off place that is kind of said in the book, right, in 152. It talks about, you can't live with alcohol, you can't live without it, and you'll know a loneliness only few do. For me, the turning point was I couldn't live with AA and CA, and I couldn't live without CA and AA. It's like those two things were what I was up against. And the steps hadn't infiltrated my life enough where I had a conscious experience with it. That's the step 0 point that I'm talking about. And they call it step 0 in meetings in Los Angeles. And I'm not the only one that's experienced it. They named it because you go round and round. That was the turning point, because I went 6 months and was out of my mind. No drinks, no drugs, taking people to meetings, chairing meetings. But it was I knew I had to stay, but I wasn't sure just yet, was I one of you? The disease was still using its powers to compare me instead of allow me to identify. The fact was that the turning point was the gift of desperation, the full on, furnace that I had to experience. And then from there, everything changed, So that was it. The step 0 experience was the turning point. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for your question, Martin. We're just going to reduce the question time to a couple of minutes. But Angela, do come on in, please.
Thank you, Angela, alcoholic. Thank you, Andy. Lovely to hear you. I could listen to you all day. I just love you daily. I really, really do. And we had the pleasure of meeting in Bournemouth, which, who'd have thought that would ever happen when you're on the other side of the world, to me. It's just incredible, isn't it, what can happen through this fellowship. It really, really is. And we do a lot of service together as well. And it's quite full on. It can be intense. It can be this. It can be that. But my question to you is, what does doing service do for you?
Oh, thanks, Angela. Love you too. Yeah, absolute highlight that we got to meet and hang out and go back to Zoom. But then, we'll see each other for sure another time. so the spirit of love is linked with the spirit of service. And I was so much a taker all my life. Buy me, bring me, give me, or I'd steal it, that I needed to be a receiver of your love in order to learn how to give. And to see, as folks watched me, where the lights come on in people, to see and go to hell and back with people, especially folks that I'm blessed to sponsor, was told to me as an experience I should not ever want to miss. And that reminds me of me, because, we're not saints here, right? And Thomas Merton said, we care for ourselves in the service of others. So nothing is more therapeutic than that, is to talk to another drug addict, another alcoholic. Because ultimately, I was saved, and how could I not, make that as really the reason, it's the reason I was born, when you find out why, right? Two most important days: when you're born and when you find out why. I found out why. So in the time that I have remaining, my whatever days I have left or whatever on this earth, I'm going to be right in the firing line, so.
Thank you for your question, Angela. And the last question of the evening is from Sue, please.
Hi, Sue. Alcoholic. Lovely to hear you, Andy. Beautiful. And I had the pleasure of seeing you in person and hearing you in person. It was a gorgeous meeting. So I'd like to know, you went through that period of depression, and how did that affect your conscious contact with God?
Hey, Sue, great to see you. Thanks so much. I was, I can only see that now in retrospect better. I mean, I was pretty frozen and numb. And I had the sense that God had never left and God was there. Because I had glimmers, moments where the sunshine started to, break through. And I didn't lose faith. I didn't lose my dependence and abandonment. That was there. It was a very quiet time, right? It just, and then suddenly it wasn't. Since you asked, literally, I woke up one day and it was like, oh, okay, it's over, and I thank God for that, because that was a God moment, that was an absolute God moment, because, to Angela's question about service too, I mean, progression in sobriety is really about progression in my relationship with God, and my God got bigger after that. It was not a fun time. I mean, it was painful because of the isolation and the quietness, but then it ended, and I thank God for that. And I didn't plan that ending. It suddenly ended. I can still see, I don't know what day it was, but I can still see myself literally waking up and Susan saying to me, "You okay?" I go, yeah, it's good, just like that.